What's up, everybody? Welcome back to JP Podcast, episode 12 with Carl Grant, consultant, speaker, author, and Christian father. We were talking off. There's a lot of different things we got into. Very excited to have you on the podcast. Thank you for being on with us today.
Happy to be here, George. Thanks.
So kind of tell us, how did you become who you are at this point in life? I know you said you were with the firm for 20 years. You helped it grow from 300 million to 2 billion. You're an author now. You speak in different countries. You speak here. You run a capital raise company with your son. There's a lot of different things that you do. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you came to be who you are?
Yeah, so it really started when I was getting my MBA at Indiana University's Kelley School of Business. I remember studying classes like Power, Persuasion, and Ethics, and it was during the beginning of the fall season at Indiana that I also became a Christian. I started reading the Bible, and I started thinking about how am I going to put my new beliefs together with this business degree that I'm getting and going out into the business world. And amazingly, I realized that a lot of those principles you read about in the Bible apply in business. Most people don't even think about putting faith and business together, but I did. And so when I would go to meet with people, when I had jobs where it was my job to sell audits for PricewaterhouseCoopers, you reap what you sow, right? If you give to other people, you tend to get more coming back. And it really just shaped my whole way of interacting with people and doing business that served me my entire career.
Was that a logical, intellectual decision to do that, or was that more of a spiritual decision for you? That what guided your beliefs on how you did that?
I think what happened was I changed who I was as a person. I was a very self-centered, egotistic, selfish person who had this change of heart at the age of 24 and had to figure out how to reconcile that with society. I'm going out into the business world, and my job is to get, and the Bible says to give. The Bible says he who wishes to be first must be last and servant of all. And so I had to think about, what does that look like in the business world? If I'm going to be servant of all, then I'm here to serve you. I might be here to sell you something, but I'm going to serve your needs. And in the end, that ended up serving me.
Wow, it's powerful. And what drove you to have that change of heart? Was it just something happened? Was there a catastrophe? Was there a relationship? Was it failure?
There were a combination of things that led up to that. I for the first time in my life, I became cognizant of sin in my life. I mean, we didn't call it sin. We were just as young men having a good time. But I realized that there were consequences to living a lifestyle where you're just doing whatever you want with whoever you want. And I saw through college, number of sexually transmitted diseases. I remember when I was in graduate school, my brother was still in college, living with his girlfriend, and she got pregnant and gave birth without him even knowing she was pregnant. I mean, he woke up one morning and had a baby. And so it was things like that was getting my attention. When I joined ROTC in college, we had to take, probably the first group to have to take an HIV test in the 80s. And in a small town in Ohio, one of the guys tested positive for HIV. That stuff scared me, right? Yeah. I mean, back then there weren't the drugs they have today to deal with these things. You just got skinny and died. And so all of this was coming together, and at the age of 24, you're starting to think about, I want to get married one day. Is meeting a girl and trying to get her to go to bed with you the best way to meet your future wife, the mother of your children? Probably not.
No.
And so when I came to faith, it was a major decision. I went from a guy who did whatever I wanted to a guy who remained celibate until I got married. And so It was a massive change. I'm not saying I was a perfect angel,
sure.
But I dated my wife for 3 years, and we were together on our wedding night. And so, that's
what
not
a beautiful
that
story,
is not
man.
the way I rolled, unfortunately, in the past.
And that transformation, how much of that would you say was your own willpower, and how much is God? Because that's it's hard to do, man.
It was zero my willpower, zero, because I actually was trying to make those changes in the flesh, and I was a utter failure. I couldn't do it. In the flesh, I couldn't. When you're trying to make changes morally in the flesh, and then all it is a challenge to like a woman. You tell her, I'm trying to not do this. I want to wait until I get married, and then you end up falling. It wasn't until I came to Christ that I had the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, and I had the power to say, no, thank you.
That's powerful. And then how did your faith develop? I know you were sharing earlier that, you read the Bible. Like, is that where it started? And how was that? Because I just finished reading the Bible, listening to it. And while I was going through it, it really helped me on dealing with the situations of today. And then I finished it, I completed it, and I'm like, okay, I've completed it. And then I stay away from it. I'm doing other things, not because I want to stay away, just distracted, completed, check it off the list. And I realized that, man, I'm still struggling now with some of these things that I was struggling with before, but before I had God's word in me, like grace and wisdom. Yeah. And so I realized like I need to get back into studying this now more than just reading it. So what's that like? Any advice there?
Yeah, well, so my wife and I have a routine. We get up every morning. I get her up at 5 a.m. and we do a Bible study together. We read one chapter of the Old Testament, one proverb. There's a proverb for every day of the month, and one chapter of the New Testament. And we listen to it while we read it. And then we pray together. And then after that, we do one of two things. We have several lists of God's promises that he has made. By the way, you were talking about AI earlier. Go ask ChatGPT to give you a list of God's promises on anything that you're dealing with. Sickness, prosperity, whatever it is you want to. It'll give you immediately promises. And we started, ever since we moved to Texas 4 years ago, started claiming his promises out loud. There's something powerful about proclaiming God's word out loud to him and owning it. And so that's something we do. We also sometimes will take a break from that because we've done those so many times, and there's certain ministers that we'll listen to for a little bit in the morning, just to get, fed and obviously go to church.
That's so powerful. So every morning, 5 a.m., you guys get up, get in God's word together, pray. What a beautiful thing. That's awesome. That's something that I could take with my wife. She's Christian, and we don't do that. It's not that we don't want to do it. We just haven't built a habit around it, and I think that needs to be more intentional.
It's like working out, right? If you work out, you'll develop physically. The spirit man needs to be fed as well, right? And that's through prayer, time in the Word, fellowship with other believers. You build up the spirit man within you.
And how do you balance that out? I know we're going to get into business here in a second, but how do you balance out being a CEO, owner of a business, a chairman of a board, being a father, 5 kids? You said 5, right? 5 kids, being a husband, working out. A lot of people, they're spread thin, so they don't feed specific areas. Is it routines? Is it habits? Is it priorities? How have you done that effectively?
Well, you do what you prioritize, right? Somebody might say, I don't have time to read the Bible. I don't have the time to work out. I don't have time to do whatever. You just don't make it a priority, right? So I get up really early in the morning, and I block time out on my calendar. I'm working out while people are still sleeping. Right? You make it a habit, right? That 5 a.m., I go to bed early. Rather than staying up late, drinking or watching late night TV, I'm sleeping by 9 o'clock.
Okay.
So I can get up, right? So you just have a lifestyle that conforms to what you prioritize. And then you block things in your calendar. So if you're working out, you don't leave that time open. My phone, you can't even get a hold of me. I'm on do not disturb until I'm done working out, right? I don't want a distraction.
So it's faith, then you take care of your fitness. You have a routine, anything else after that?
Well, faith, family, health and fitness, and then my work.
Okay.
And I work hard.
Okay. And so you get out of college, you're working at this firm, and you're there to sell, I guess you said audits?
That was one of my jobs, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that switch in mindset from I'm here to sell you something, but I want to serve you based on my faith, based on, good business practices? What was that switch in mindset? How did you apply that to building your corporate professional, journey?
So when I got to PricewaterhouseCoopers as their first business development hire, I remember the guy who hired me, former IBM sales executive. He goes, we haven't done this before. He said, it's like I'm leading you into a dark room and I'm not showing you the way out and I'm not giving you a flashlight. You're going to have to figure this out, like how to sell accounting services. So I started going around visiting these accountants and asking them about what they did. I'm married to an auditor, so it's not the most exciting thing in the world. Sorry, auditors, but I started listening to who their clients were, and that's what was exciting, because they audited most of the venture funds in the country and some of the biggest companies in the world. And so as I got to thinking about, no entrepreneur wants to buy an audit. Like all successful entrepreneurs will need an audit, but nobody wants to buy one, right? And so I figured out what they do want is investors and customers. And so I made it my business to be the super connector who brought them customers and brought them investors. And I became the most popular guy in town doing that. Everybody wanted to work with us. In fact, people sent their friends to me. I got more CEOs introduced to me just because I was the guy that could help make their business successful. So I took that same practice at PricewaterhouseCoopers and I brought it to a law firm called Cooley, where when I got there, they had $310 million in revenue. And when I left, they had over $2 billion in annual revenue. And I had a team of 17 people making those connections. They all pretty much performed in that same manner, and it was highly successful for the 20 years that we were there.
So if I'm starting off and I want to go be successful, you went to meet with people that were in your industry to learn about what they did, and then from there you saw an opportunity of things that people needed to accomplish their goals but necessarily didn't want to spend money on an audit, to do all these other things. But what did they want, and then how did your service tie into what they want? Is that correct?
Well, I think that the main thing to take away from this is when you go to meet somebody, that human nature is we want, right? We want. And so people walk around with their hand out asking for things. And that's a total turnoff. Like people don't like that. What they do like is when somebody comes and they want to give to them. What happens is I meet a CEO and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I know somebody that could help you with your business. Let me connect you with this guy. I know an investor that would be perfect for your business. May I introduce you to him? Once you start doing that, all of a sudden they're like, wow, I like this guy, and then you do enough of that for them. They're like, well, what can I do for you? Well, just keep us in mind when you need to hire an auditor.
So then you were actively developing other relationships with executives or professionals to say, hey, I just want to get to know you. Oftentimes there's opportunities where I can connect and introduce people. So I like to build my network in case there's an opportunity I can connect you and a friend or you and a partner, right? And at the same time, that was the professionals. And then investors, you were helping them with investors or bringing capital. So that was an active part of your strategy of developing these relationships with other people to be able to be a connector.
Yeah. Now when I do things, I don't even do them with outcomes in mind. Like, for example, I got an invitation last year to go to Necker Island, Richard Branson's island.
Okay.
And it was a group called Forming Impact. I just said yes. I figured I didn't even know anything about what they were doing, but if it was Richard Branson's island and there were 40 people coming, highly curated from around the world, I wanted to be there.
Sure.
And so I made a bunch of friends there, and those friends include the Crown Prince of Iran. Those friends include some of the most amazing entrepreneurs and investors and heads of family offices that you could ever imagine. We just hung out for a week. There's no agenda. Nobody was trying to sell anybody anything. Those are the kind of relationships I like to develop. I do those things when I get invited to go on a delegation to Saudi Arabia or to Pakistan. I've done a couple of those, and it's amazing people that go on those delegations, right? They're curated people. I have no agenda. I just go and I develop those relationships. And when you travel, to Riyadh with a group of people and hang out with them for a week, you got a group of friends. And we all find ways to stay in touch, and we have WhatsApp groups, and you just never know. You never know what amazing things will come out of these relationships that you build. So I used to do it with purpose, but today, the less I have purpose in building the relationship, the better it is. I mean, I got to know this guy in Pakistan who is now the ambassador to the United States. We were friends. I met him, and hung out with him twice over there, and then he got the ambassadorship, and I'm like, congratulations, but if I went to try to get him because I wanted to do something with him, he might not want to talk to me. But I helped his son with his business, right? I mean, there was nothing in that for me. You just build those relationships, and you just never know when you're gonna need to call on someone.
When you're developing a new relationship with somebody, is there a sequence like in your mind, or just naturally, I'm curious about you, or tell me about you, or like how would you advise people to be able to be more organic in developing friendships with people instead of thinking, how can I connect this, or how can this produce something?
There's a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, written by Dale Carnegie. That is the Bible for human relationships. The key in developing those relationships is to be genuinely interested in the other person. Just ask them about them. Don't worry so much about talking about yourself. Ask them about themselves. And people care a lot about themselves, and they're happy to open up and tell you things. And so when I meet someone, I try to ask them a series of questions about them, and I don't have them in my mind ahead of time. I'm just genuinely interested in the other person, and that typically will develop a really good friendship.
Okay, yeah, we have a saying: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And then we have a saying that we teach our guys as well in terms of instead of trying to be interesting, be interested. So we totally kind of teach those principles to our guys to be more present with people and be genuine about it.
Yeah.
So now you're at Cooley. You're there for how many years?
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah, I've been gone for 2.5.
Okay. What kept you there? Like, what was your reason for staying there? Were you just happy where you were at? You were growing? Because 20 years is a long time.
It's a long time. I never set out to do that job, right? They called me, and I was able to use that job as a platform for a ministry that I ran called the High Tech Prayer Breakfast for 20 years. And then I was called to move on to Austin for the things we talked about, which we can talk about later if you want. I was happy there. The firm had a great culture. I enjoyed the people I worked with. They paid me well. I had a great team. I don't have anything bad to say about that firm. It was a great place to be for 20 years. And I had 5 young kids. They're grown now, but I got 7 weeks of paid vacation. I mean, who couldn't enjoy that? And I got to spend a lot of time with my kids. I never missed a birthday. I never missed anything. I made every sports game, so it was a good quality of life job.
So there was a lot of flexibility in your scheduling.
Yeah.
With it. And you said they had a great culture. If you had to use a couple phrases to, like, we're working on always developing a better culture with our staff, with our agents, what were the things about their culture that really you enjoyed that connected with your values?
I don't ever remember a harsh word spoken between anybody there the entire time I was there. I heard a story of something that happened years before I was there where a partner in the law firm, important guy, senior partner in the law firm, berated a secretary, and the partner was asked to leave. Right, that type of behavior was not tolerated, and it made it a very pleasant place to work. People were genuinely nice to each other, and that's, I think part of the culture was the partners there at the end of the year the weighted part of their compensation was who helped you and how, and who did you help and how. And that was a really important thing. And when
that's powerful.
Reviews were being done, anybody could say anything about anybody. Like
Yeah.
You never knew who was going to say something that was going to go in your review. And so you just thought about how you treated people.
So that was the two of the questions: who helped you, and how, and who did you help,
and how.
Wow, and that was every review. So
that was the part. I never saw this myself, but I just heard from the partners that was a weighted part of their compensation there, and compensation review. It was called an "I Love Me" memo that they would do, and they took that very seriously.
That's powerful. That's a great, because we're trying to integrate. We're trying to improve our culture, and I think we have a great culture as a firm, but we're trying to improve it. And how do we make it more family oriented? How do we make it more welcoming? How do we make it more kind? How do we make it and there's this belief system where you can't be a high driving organization and have high kindness, and that's something that
we increased revenues by $1.7 billion annually during that time, and everybody was still nice.
Yeah.
And people took care of the kids and got the time off, and I mean, it worked.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then in that, from what I heard about you from Shane and our prep for the meeting, that you had a couple entrepreneurial ventures along the way that maybe didn't work out. Then you went back and like, can you share some?
Rough.
Can you share some of that?
Yeah. It's a rough business, and you just gotta know that not everything succeeds. So when I got out of graduate school, the first thing I did was to try. This was back before we had all the technology we have today. It was back when everything was done by satellites. My dad and I tried to start a cable television network, and we got bits and pieces of the business up and running, but not the whole thing. And this was back at the beginning. I'll date myself. It was 1991. Back at the beginning of the 500 channel universe and all that, and we had a niche channel called FitNet, the Health, Fitness, and Lifestyle Network, and he had all the connections in the industry to do it. That was a testing of my faith during those 4 years that I spent on that, because we had all these huge deals, one after another, put in front of us that were just going to put us on the map, and then they would evaporate. And what I found it did was it drove me to my knees. Like I'm praying, God, please, like, let something work, right? Because nothing was working. But it was during that time that I met my wife, and I was in a humble place in my life, and I. When we got married, I had not a penny to my name. She married me all on faith and potential. So that was one of them. The other one was after I did a venture-backed company in 2000. It was a company called iCast, and I was on the management team of the first company to put video over the internet, if you can believe. That was 24 years ago. And we raised $36 million of venture capital on 1 frame per second motion JPEG. We got up to 3 frames. We got it to MPEG-4. We thought we were going to be YouTube before YouTube even existed, and the market just cratered. This was March of 2000. It just cratered, and while we were doing really cool stuff, and we had $36 million and 156 employees, the VC said, no, I don't think so, and they pulled the plug because we didn't have any revenue. We had a partnership with Sony. It just
wow.
It was a crazy experience. So that's where I was during the internet boom. And bust. And then I joined a buddy of mine's. It was kind of an early fintech company. It was financial services that was morphing into like a data company called Cyber CFO. He had $1 million in revenue when I joined. Had raised like just under $3 million, and I helped double the revenue to $2 million. And then 9/11 happened, and we were in the middle of raising a Series B round. I was leading the charge out in the marketplace doing that. And our Series A investor pulled out of our Series B round after 9/11. And so the funding didn't happen, and we had spent enough money. You kind of get addicted to venture capital, right? We had enough office space and stuff that we just couldn't get out of, and it ended up crushing the company when that financing didn't come through. So yeah, after 2 of those, my wife said, she's got 4 kids at the time. She's like, how about you don't do any more startups while I'm raising all these kids? And so I obliged, and that's when I joined our law firm. It was the same law firm for both of those companies. So
wow.
Yeah.
Those things teach you, obviously.
Yeah.
You learn. If you, with your wisdom, with your experience that you have now, if there was somebody like you with your abilities back then in those 2 positions, would you have handled them different? Would they have gone different? Like, could you make them successful knowing what you know now? Or it was just you gave your very best at that time?
When you have outside investors, so I spend my life working with venture capitalists. So I love you, venture capitalists, but when you got venture capitalists in your business, it's not your business, it's their business. It's, you're sharing that business with them. And when they want to pull the plug on you, they pull the plug. And,
got it.
And you really, there's nothing you could do. Like,
okay.
I think those were real good learning experiences. If I could have advised them, I would have said, hey, this is like video over the internet. Why don't you put the technology on ice and like wait out this recession, because recessions end, and
yeah.
And that's probably what should have been done. The CEO wasn't too happy with the decisions that were being made. In fact, he was replaced in the middle of all that. So it was a rough set of circumstances.
What's the difference between like private equity and venture capital? Because I hear that.
Yeah, two different animals, right? Think of venture capital as really companies that have $1 million or more in revenue for the most part, right? It's not anything below that, it's really early seed stage capital, right?
Okay.
$1 million or more in revenue. They care about revenues, right? Private equity guys, it's really when you get to 10 million or more in revenue, and they care about EBITDA. It's a whole different world. VCs never talk about EBITDA because most of the companies they back have no EBITDA. They're burning all their capital to grow their businesses. VCs care about organic growth. You know, they want to see pretty much a doubling of revenue year over year with a pathway towards somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 100 million in year 5. Whereas private equity guys, they care about profitability, and they also will back things like acquisitions. So it's not always, but they don't care about just organic growth. So it's two different beasts. I kind of straddle both worlds. In fact, just last week I spoke on today's Friday. It was this week. I lose track of my days. I was this week. I was on a private equity panel. It was a virtual panel, but I know enough about it that I get invited to speak.
Got it. So seed capital under $1 million, private equity. VC, venture capital between $1 million and $10 million.
And some VCs will go higher.
Okay, but private equity of 10 mil above.
10 million above, yeah.
And when you're looking at those kinds of companies, since your specialty is venture capital, right?
For the most part, I mean that's.
I don't want to put you in a box.
No,
I'm just asking.
I mean for the most part, but I do know enough of private equity guys and people that play in the family office world. But most of my contacts are VCs.
Okay, and when they're looking for companies that organically are growing to 50 to 100 million in 5 years, is there a type of industry that those companies are mainly in? Is it mainly tech?
Mainly technology.
Okay.
Mainly, it's not necessarily 100%. There are some outside of that, and then there are some venture capitalists that invest in life sciences companies, and there the revenue doesn't really hold. So because I'm also chairman of a life sciences company, and so in that world, data is like revenue, and so think of like animal data as being kind of less than $1 million in revenue, and then human data that's like having $1 million in revenue. And so once you have human data, everything changes. So I'm helping 2 companies raise money right now. One with a cancer treatment, the other one with an Alzheimer treatment, and they're both right on the edge of human trials, and it's hard. We're having a hard time raising the capital.
Got it. Because there's just so much uncertainty.
Yeah, look, VCs like to get the risk out of the deal, right? And when you've got human data, it's like having 3 or more customers and $1 million or more in annual recurring revenue. You've gotten a lot of the risk out of the deal, right? If you have just one customer, I had a company like this that had one customer with 12 million in revenue. Everybody wanted to talk with him when they saw he had 12 million in revenue, but when they saw it was just one customer, the customer concentration's too great, and so. If that one customer goes away, then your whole business is gone. And so they don't like to see just one customer. Okay. I think 3 is the magic number.
Got it. And you started a business with your son. Is that correct?
I did, yeah.
Raising capital.
Yeah. It's called Capital Raise.
My bad. Capital Raise.
Yeah. And we're actually in discussions right now about merging it with an international company, which is kind of interesting. So hopefully that'll come through and it'll happen because it'll be good for the company. But basically I was in the professional services world for 25 years, and I built this amazing network of investors. And so rather than just let that network languish, I took it and I built it into a technology platform. So think about a LinkedIn-like platform. What we have is all of their investment criteria, because when you have thousands of investor contacts, it's impossible to remember what they all invest in.
Makes sense.
Who does this type of software, who does cybersecurity, who likes companies based in the Northeast versus the Midwest, all of those nuances. So the companies build a profile, and we have a matching algorithm that will take information from their profile and query our database and show us which investors are the best fit for the company. And then we use that as a technology-enabled service. And so we get the companies introduced to investors. Whereas if you were a CEO going out and trying to do that yourself, it's going to take you forever and a day to figure out who all those guys are.
Yeah,
how
who's
to
the
get
right
to
people
them.
to talk to.
You got to get warm referrals, right? If you cold email these guys, the chances of getting a response is very slim.
So companies come to you specifically to say, hey, we want to raise some capital, and you, based on your relationships and your contacts and that database, that technology, you're able to identify who would be the right partners to entertain
and make warm referrals. And we're picky about who we take on. We don't take just anybody on. We have to believe you're fundable, because we're not sending garbage out to our investors. You know, those contacts are more important to me than making new money off of a client.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And is there a series for people that are looking to raise capital, since that's a specialty of yours as well? Is there a series of 3, 4, 5 things that you look for a company that wants to raise capital as you're filtering them out? And if so, can you share a couple of those?
Yeah. Well, we look at that revenue. That's important. But
the revenue.
But, beyond the revenue threshold, are you selling into a large and growing market? Do you have an unfair business advantage?
You said, are you selling to a
large and growing market?
Large and growing market. Okay.
Do you have an unfair business advantage? So do you have a patent that will keep others from doing what you're doing? Do you have a strategic relationship with a major player that is going to keep others from entering in? Do you have a distinct first mover advantage, whereas others would have a really hard time catching up with you? And are you a team that's done it before together? So those are the 3 things that really make a company fundable in my mind.
Large and growing market.
Unfair business advantage.
Unfair business advantage, like a what's that called? I don't know if it's called moat, like it's some kind of barrier where it's hard to enter.
Barrier to entry, sure.
Okay, so unfair business advantage, and then number 3, has that team done it
together before?
Okay. Do you see that it's like a lot of teams in that world have done it, and then they pull those guys into a different company to do it again? Is that normal?
I've got a company that we're working with that the founder and his chairman had a previous company that they took public, and then they sold it for $750 million. They did it together before. Like that, that was a long time ago. It was those numbers don't sound as big today as they were back when they did it.
It's still big, yes.
It's still big. It's still pretty big, right? And so I've got that Alzheimer's company I'm talking about. That guy's taken 2 companies public, right? So it's not a team that's done it together before, but he did it. He's done it before, and so sometimes that will get you a meeting alone, right? If this guy's done 2 IPOs, maybe he'll do a 3rd, right? I mean, that's one of those things that investors really like to see.
That makes sense. And do you take an interest in some of these companies at times because you're looking at opportunities? You're like, wow, this is a great opportunity. Maybe I want to do something with it, or no?
I wish I had that kind of wealth. My 5 kids. I always joke they spend my money faster than I can make it. I got one going to Baylor right now. Whew, that's an expensive college down there. I wish he would have gotten a scholarship. I'm an angel investor in that company that I chair.
Yeah.
And I am an investor in Yard Ventures. So I was fortunate enough to be able to go back right before COVID and go to Harvard for an executive education course on private equity and venture capital.
Okay.
And I feel like I've entered the club, and so I got invited to invest in this thing called the Yard Ventures, and what they do is they raise money for Harvard alumni, and they invest it in Harvard entrepreneurs, right? So I figured, what the heck? I mean, at least there's a screening process there that these people couldn't be too stupid to have gotten into and out of Harvard. So I figure, what the heck? I'll invest some money here. And I've invested in a fund as a limited partner before, so I've dibbled and dabbled, but no, I'm not yet an angel investor. I perhaps will be one day because I know so much. I mean, I can spot a deal. That's the one gift I've got, is that I can spot a good deal and a good team and a fundable company. So that's why investors take my referrals, because
that makes sense.
If Carl sent this to me, it's got to be worth looking at, right?
Sure. What inspired you to write a book? Because that's kind of how when we were looking at like who can we have on the show, and we went through profiles, and it was like, hey, this would be a great person, a great guest to have on the show. What inspired you to write a book? Why?
It's one of those things I've always had in me. It's like, it's hard to explain. It was in me and it had to get out of me, right? And I didn't even know what it really looked like when I just knew I wanted to do it. I've been writing like writing a book is a daunting task. And so I never thought about writing a book. I would write articles, and a lot of these just sat on my computer for years. And I started sharing them on LinkedIn. And then I realized, I need somebody to help me organize this. Like, I don't know how to do this. And so that's where I hired a group called Leaders Press, where they actually done this many, many times. And they here's how you do it, and they put you through a process, and they help draw the information out of you. And it was, up until then, I thought I was going to do a book on how I did what I did professionally, because it's a niche and there's no classes on how to do this. Like, when I would go and speak at a college, and like my alma mater, and one time I went there and I was asked to, I didn't know I was going to be speaking in front of a class. I came in, I thought I was going to say hi to some students, maybe answer a few questions. And the professor said, "Did you bring a PowerPoint?" I'm like, "No." And she gave me her class. This happened 4 times
Wow.
during this visit, where I was just given a class for an hour and 15 minutes. I'm like, oh crap, I better think of something to say. And I started just talking about what I did professionally. And I got so many messages on my phone, like LinkedIn messages, like best speaker we've ever had, which is hilarious because I had nothing prepared. How do you get a job doing what you do? So I realized there was a lot of interest. So I thought I was going to write a book on that. And then when I got to thinking about it, really, it's a really niche audience, right? And so what worked to make me successful professionally has also worked in my family life and in the community. And so rather than just talking about how to be abundant at work, I wrote about how to have an abundant life. And interestingly, 2 years into it, I thought I was done. And my daughter got a hold of my book, my oldest daughter, and she said, "Dad, I read a lot of these books. Let me help you with this." So she read it, and she goes, "You got to be willing to kill your baby." And I'm like, "I can't kill it. Like, I wrote this thing. I can't, And so she identified about a third of the book that had to go because it was too businessy. And so she helped guide me on rewriting
That's so
the rest
cool.
of the book. Yeah. And so thankful to her. Her name's Teresa. She goes by Twee. It wouldn't be what it is without her touch on it. It would have you would have stopped reading it, like halfway through probably.
And so the living an abundant life, what does that mean to somebody? What's the essence of the book?
I brought it with me because I spent a lot of time thinking about the term abundant life, and I should have this memorized, but I don't. And so let me just read you what I wrote.
Please.
In there. I wrote, "The abundant life is fulfilling, happy, positive, and upbeat. It's inherently imbued with meaning. It's where you look forward to getting up every morning and where you live each day with purpose. It's a life where you have a sense of belonging and an overwhelming sense of being blessed beyond measure. It's a life where you feel grounded, secure, and with a solid foundation underfoot that is capable of withstanding any storm." That's the essence of an abundant life. And so I did my best to live up to writing about how to live that. And it wasn't, I've already confessed to you that my life, wasn't still isn't perfect, right? But when you read a book from somebody, I'm a bit older than you. I'm 58 years old, just turned, and when you read books that are written by somebody who's gone through a lot of life's trials and has learned from mistakes and has turned his life into something beautiful, I think you can read those books and learn from them and not repeat those mistakes. And so I would encourage young people, get a hold of this book and learn from the things that I didn't do right.
Are there a couple guiding principles that you would say this is the core of living an abundant life?
I break it down to having a sound mind, taking care of your body, your spiritual fitness. I break it down into every aspect of life, and I think it starts out with knowing your purpose in life. That's key, right? And then developing a sound mind. So many people live life just thinking whatever thoughts pop into their heads, right? And saying whatever negative words come out of their mouth. I have a diagram in the book where it's thoughts, words, actions. I mean, it's you end up speaking negativity into your life, and if you can realize that the only person who controls what goes on in your mind is you, right? And if you don't program your mind, somebody else will program it for you. And so I really take people through the exercise of how to get control of your thought life, and then how to control what comes out of your mouth and what things you speak into reality. Just like the promises I told you about, right?
Yeah.
By speaking God's promises out loud, I'm putting positive stuff out into the universe, right? I mean, there's a whole, and some people might not believe in this stuff. There's a whole theory of, quantum physics, like that
Energy,
where, that just the sound coming out of the mouth gives life to things. And I believe that, right? If you walk around, I don't even like to give examples of saying negative things, but if you constantly saying negative things about yourself, it's going to come back. I watch guys who say that I'm getting old, I don't ever speak that on myself. Yeah, I'm 58 years old, but I'm improving every year, man. I'm getting fitter every year. I'm getting healthier. I'm even getting younger. I just won't get into this, right? I mean, and as a result, I wear the same size clothes I did in high school, right?
That's great.
I mean, so it all starts with what you think, and then what you speak.
Yeah, John Gordon. He's written a lot of different books. I don't know if you've read any of them, but like The Energy Bus. I think you'd love his content. The Energy Bus, The Carpenter. There's a lot of great books, but he came and spoke at our event, and he says, I will tell you, many of us have negative thoughts or things that we think or things that we feel. He says, and I'll tell you how I know that it's not from you. He says, because you wouldn't choose it for yourself. And he says, so if it's not from you and that's external, how do you start changing that? And the biggest thing that he shared at that conference was stop listening to yourself and start speaking to yourself. And so I totally understand that. And it's amazing how many times a negative thought or a limiting belief, just something that will come through your mind. And if you don't catch it, you're not attentive to it, and you don't transform that, and it's hard to transform it. This girl at church, she says, how do you disciple yourself? This was probably 6 years ago. She was like, how do you disciple yourself? And I understand the concept of the question. She's like, but if you don't have God's word in you, how do you defend against negative thoughts inside of you without having God's word? And that was like the starting journey of building my relationship with God. And Jeremiah 29:11, I know the thoughts I have for you, thoughts to prosper you and not harm you.
Plans to give you hope in the future. Absolutely.
Dude.
See, it's written on the heart, right? The reason we both know that is, it's one of those promises. And by reciting those promises every morning, what happens is those things get imbued in your mind. And then when a negative thing happens, you can immediately draw the scripture to mind and replace that negative lie from the devil, thought of the world, whatever you want to call it, with the truth of God's word. And not everybody listening to this is going to be there, and so there may be other positive things that you can put in your mind, but there's nothing as powerful as God's word.
That makes sense. That's great advice. Shane talked to me about this. We talked about it briefly. Through your journey, you're starting these companies, you're taking care of your family, you're running your business, and then your family gets sick. Right?
That was rough.
What was and from what Shane told me and what you said, it was Lyme disease.
Yeah, and it was misdiagnosed for years. My wife was feeling sick and she didn't know what was wrong with her. I ended up sending her to a chiropractor, who the chiropractor said, I think you have Lyme disease. And for years we tried everything the medical profession had to offer. Every antibiotic, what happens is the antibiotics don't kill Lyme disease. What they do, and now I'm speaking on, I've been deep into the sciences. I'm not a scientist, but I've actually observed these Lyme spirochetes under microscopes.
Wow.
Right, and when you put the antibiotic on the Lyme spirochete, it either curls up into a cyst form, which makes you feel better, or it burrows into your bone marrow and hides. Right. And so my wife had a PICC line in her arm for months. She walked around, with this, and she felt great. She actually got up out of bed. Yeah, PICC line. And, where you have it in your vein, and she's just pumping these antibiotics into her system.
Wow.
And then as soon as the insurance company cut us off from the PICC line, she was back in bed feeling worse than ever. And so it's just a temporary fix.
That's got to be a horrible feeling, like not being able to help your family, hopeless. You're going to doctor.
bedridden for 3 years. In fact, I ended up finding something that cured her, and this was, in my job, doing business for a law firm, I met with a lot of companies that never saw the light of day. And I was meeting with a company that was killing diseases that are thought to be incurable. Won't get into what they were, but I'm like, what do you know about Lyme disease? And they said, we can kill it. And I didn't believe them. They sent me this formula. Back then they were having her nebulize it. She nebulized the formula for 60 days. And I kid you not, she went from being in bed for 3 years. We had horses. We lived on a farm back in Virginia back then. Those horses didn't get ridden. They were out fending for themselves in the field. She started riding 5 horses a day.
Wow.
And then she would get tired and get back in bed and say, I don't think I'm better, And I'm like, no, you're better. Because I know she was better because she spent like $65,000 like that, like pulling down. She pulled up all the carpet off the floor, had hardwood floors put down, replaced all of our appliances, put backsplashes in the kitchen. I said, you're too healthy. I said, I'm not gonna keep going. I can't afford this. You got to get back in bed, is what I said.
That's funny.
But no, she got better, and we have been taking the invention that got her better, and we've been developing it, and we've got a patent on it, and yeah.
Is that that's so amazing? God bless her. God bless you. That's awesome. Is that something that she still has to take to feel better, or she doesn't have to?
She doesn't, but we do. It's really and I write about it in the book. And if somebody hears this and they want to reach out to me, you can find me on LinkedIn or on Instagram, carl.grant@.iii, and just hit me up and let me know. It's more of a nutraceutical, to be honest with you. It's a set of minerals that are delivered in a proprietary way.
And something that's just healthy overall for people to take.
Yeah.
And your children had it as well.
Yeah, we learned a lot about Lyme disease. So I knew a couple of them had it because it's horrible. It's a horrible disease. They were suicidal. They were, we had to pull them out of school, put them on homebound. It was a mess. It was a mess. I mean, I had a daughter who was cutting herself, I had kids that were self-medicating. It's just bad. Deal with drug addictions. So all this while my wife's in bed and I'm trying to earn a living to pay for everything. It was bad. What we learned, and this is not out in, you can't find this, you won't find this in, Asking AI or out on the internet, but we found that you can transmit Lyme disease human to human. The spirochetes, I've seen them. They live in your saliva. And so if you merely, kiss someone, you could get them Lyme disease, or sharing a utensil or whatever, toothbrush. Nobody knows that. And most people who have Lyme disease don't have symptoms.
How did you guys determine it was Lyme disease? Because you said the doctors were doing all these tests.
The problem is the tests that they have in the market are very inaccurate.
Okay.
They're very inaccurate. A lot of this stuff is not out in the mainstream that you find, right? It's just people who find each other. And so we had somebody who was a friend who developed a saliva test. In the saliva test, they would take a swab and then they would have it looked at under the microscope to see if you had the Lyme spirochetes. And so, they're like parasites. They look like parasites. And what we saw under the microscope is that the material we had, as opposed to the antibiotics, when you put it onto the spirochetes, they just came apart.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was amazing. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people that have gotten better as a result.
Yeah.
We can't say we have a cure. We don't have any FDA approval for any of that, but we can say that we can definitely help the symptoms.
Sure.
Yeah.
And your children, so everybody, you're going through this, you're making a living, your wife's in bed, your kids are going through issues. How do you maintain your sanity at that time? And I know your faith has to play a part of it.
It was hard. When you read about people having the elders laying hands on people and anointing them with oil and praying over them, we were trying everything. I mean everything, because we were desperate. It was a desperate situation. It was. I had to declare medical hardships at work where I would cash in my paid time off and use, and I love my paid time off, but I'd have to use that money for medical bills because we were seeing Lyme specialists that were just, it was highway robbery. I mean, they would charge $800 a visit. It was ridiculous, you know. And when you got the whole family going through it, it was a mess.
How do you and I know this is off topic, but it's a question for me. When my mom got cancer, I'm like, God, like, why? When my mom had a stroke, I was like, God, why? And so we had a great gentleman on the show, and Richard, and he lost his son, and that got him closer to God. And I'm like, and I just think about my boy. I have 2 boys, and we're having a third on the way. That's not my first reaction, you know, like I'm still human, and like I'm going to be upset. Like that's just my human nature.
Yeah, but we don't forget, we live in a fallen world, right? God gave mankind one way to you know, one thing he wasn't supposed to do, and that was to not eat fruit from the tree in the center of the garden. And ever since that sin, and that sin's inherited generation after generation, we live in a fallen world, and you can't blame these things on God. God doesn't bring disaster upon you, but He's there with you in the disaster, right? You have to realize that it's not going to be perfect until we get to heaven. It's just not. And so, if I walk out of this building and I get in my car and my car gets in a wreck, it wasn't God that sent my wreck. That guy could have been drinking who hit me, right? You know, we live in a fallen world, and unfortunately, you know, Lyme disease and cancer and these things that get into us, it's not something that God put upon us.
Sure. So you go through this, and there was something that Shane had shared with me where you were running a men's fellowship breakfast.
Actually, I think it's a high-tech prayer breakfast.
Okay.
It wasn't just men; it was men and women.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're running that, and you're at a point where I think you were going to conclude it. I may have misunderstood the story. You were going to conclude it, and then somebody comes.
Yeah.
Can you share that story?
I can. That was a wild story. I thought after 10 years of doing the high-tech prayer breakfast, you know, maybe we had completed our mission. You know, we had, you know, had many people come to know the Lord through the breakfast, and then I had a friend of mine, we'll just call him Mo, a guy who grew up in a family where the dad was Muslim and the mother was Catholic, and you know what they usually adopt the father's faith, but he's kind of a secular guy, you know, and he showed up that day, and I had never experienced anything like this before. I had one experience with the Holy Spirit when I came to Christ, where I actually felt it blow through me, you know, that was, but I never had any like speaking to anyone. So he comes, my friend Mo comes, and he gives his life to Christ at the breakfast, and then a couple weeks later he comes into my office all bothered, and he says, Carl, I'm a educated man. I've got a PhD from Carnegie Mellon. He goes, God is speaking to me in dreams. He goes, do I need a shrink? I'm like, I'd never heard this before.
Wow.
So I don't know what to do. Like I'm like, well, what's he saying? And so he started telling me the things he was saying, and I think I had a paper copy of the Bible. So you know, this is a while back, and I opened it up and I said, well, everything you're telling me he's saying to you is consistent with what's in the Bible. I said, and I took him back and showed him how the prophets in the Old Testament, that God would speak to them in visions and dreams. And I said, I think what happening is really happening. Like nobody's ever told me anything about this. I had no context for this, you know. And so he didn't want to take my word for it. So he flew all the way to Egypt to meet with a Coptic priest. He's, you know, half Egyptian, half Italian. And the Coptic priest told him the same thing. And the crazy thing is, so fast forward, I'm at a lunch that I invited him to, and he comes up to me and he says, Carl, it doesn't surprise me I'm having lunch with you today. He goes, I have a message for you. And I was like, you got to be kidding. The God of the universe is talking to you about me? I'm like, what did he tell you? Did he tell you about some deep-seated sin in my life or something? I mean, I'm scared, right? Because I know he's hearing from God. And he goes, no. He goes, there's a huge blessing in store for you and your family. And I said, what is it? He goes, I don't know. It's big. And so I'm looking for something that's got at least 6 zeros behind it, right? I'm like, it's got to be big, right? And so I'm looking for this blessing, and I completely missed it. It was my son. This was 10 years ago, because my son, who's 20 now, was 10 years old. He's tugging at my shirt. He's like, Dad. And I said, yeah. I said, what? He goes, that prophecy that Mo gave you. I said, yeah. He said, that was the cure for Lyme disease.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, you're right. I missed it. Because you can't put a price tag on health. I would have paid anything for my wife to get better, but it was. And that blessing continues to be a blessing in that we're now taking it to market. And
what an amazing story, man.
Yeah, and there's applications well beyond Lyme disease, that I don't even want to talk about on this podcast. But I tell you, we're curing previously thought incurable diseases, and we've got data, like independent data, showing us that we're doing it. So that's
so amazing.
It's exciting. So
what a powerful story.
Yeah.
You're at a point where you're like, I'm going to finish, and God, like, just like the timing of life, how God speaks to you.
And I just kept going after that. And then it's, it wasn't the only, I'm not going to get into all my experiences, but that opened up a whole new window into stuff that's God's doing in people's lives that I didn't even know. Like,
Do you think like the closer you, because there's part of the verse in the Bible says the more you draw me, the more you look for me, the more you find me. Do you think God is trying to speak to people and they're just not present? They're just not spending enough time there? Because
I do, but some people can hear better than others. So there's certain folks that have the gift of hearing from God. I think the challenge is you have to quiet your mind, really quiet. I mean, you have to get yourself into where there's just nothing but white space, so that you get into the spiritual to be able to hear from God. So I went on I was a part of this discipleship group through my church, and the scariest thing I did was when they had us go to do silent retreats. And I'm like, silent retreat? It's like, you have to go off by yourself, like in a field, no phone, no people, for hours, and listen, and with a piece of paper. That's wild. Like, I don't know.
How was that?
George, you don't know me that well, but you can tell, like, I got a lot going on in my mind. For me to get quiet, it's hard enough for me to fall asleep. Like, for me to get quiet and like be, and there's that still small voice. But you really, and the interesting thing was, I had this discussion. I was in, either in Pakistan or Saudi. I think it was Saudi Arabia, and there was a Muslim guy, there, and he was talking about hearing from God too, and he was talking about the same scenario where you had to have a complete clear mind, and you have to be listening because it's a still small voice. I think there's people who have the gift of being able to get there and listen and hear and see, and some people have dreams that can be interpreted. I'm not, like, I've gotten to that still small voice, and then you're never sure, is that God's voice or is that just a random thought that popped into my head?
Yeah.
And usually if you have like a believing spouse, you can ask, do you think this is from God? She's like, that is not something you would have thought of. Right? So
That's funny.
And I've now that I've been around the world and I've seen a few things, I've met people that do hear from God, and those are interesting people, and I follow a few of them too. It's wild. It's so it's not for everyone, but those people exist, and I have an appreciation for that gift now, because it's not really my gift.
And when we talked about you moving from Virginia to Austin, right? Are you comfortable sharing? Or
Yeah,
do you want
it's all out there on the table now.
Well, we can.
Yeah.
What was your main reason, I guess, for coming here?
So I tell my secular friends,
Okay.
I came here for the weather, because it gets cold in Virginia, and not so much here. It's pretty hot here, and but what was really on my heart was I felt God tugging at my heart to start this thing called the Sunday service at South by Southwest. I had been going to South by Southwest since 2013, and I had a friend, is a woman friend who moved down here from Northern Virginia, and when I was here for South by Southwest, she invited me to go to church with her, and it made me realize that I didn't go to church on South by Southwest weekends. I come down here and have a really good time, and I never even thought about church because so many events going on, and probably the churches are closed up because everything's busy downtown, and it was a really good experience. So I thought, we need to bring church to South by Southwest, and that thought was with me for years. I was like, how do we do this? Like I was like trying to talk to people from afar. I was like, this is not going to happen. So I had to actually move here and be here for a year and get to know people from the churches. And the church I'm going to, the pastor there was really got behind this. I remember having lunch with him. I was told he was the pastor of the pastors in Austin. Like, he's got this group called Christ Together, and he had lunch with me. He said, Carl, I've done a lot of stuff in this city. He goes, the one thing I haven't been able to figure out is how to crack South by Southwest. He said, if you can figure that out, I'll line up every church in the town around you. And I'm like, oh, wow. So I called this group called the Luis Palau Association.
The what?
It's the Luis Palau Association. So Luis Palau, he passed away a few years ago.
Okay.
I got to go to his funeral. It was unbelievable. It was more of a celebration than a funeral. But he was, think of a Hispanic Billy Graham.
Okay.
He was a guy who would do these massive festivals and evangelize all over the world. He was just an awesome guy. I've supported his ministry for 20 years. But they go into cities where they're invited. And I always thought there was a bunch of hooey when they say, like, how do you get invited by the churches in the city? Do they just come together and invite you? And I got to see it. Like the churches were coming together, and I was the one who called them, and I said, would you be willing to come to Austin, Texas? The churches are getting together to do this thing. And they did. They came and they got that first one off the ground, and the second one they helped a lot with. They're still involved, but they pretty much got the thing going for us, and that's how it came together. We had 5,800 people come last year. I think it was the biggest event at the interactive portion of South by Southwest.
What a story, man! That's crazy.
We had some seriously good musicians and movie stars, and the CEO of Intel came to speak. It's pretty amazing.
What an amazing life, Carl. Like you're like, you're living this, you're creating this amazing life, and you're blessing a lot of people, dude. That's so cool. We were at John Maxwell's event in Orlando, and he does like a leadership summit, and it was after the meeting finished, he's like, hey, I'd love to, I know some of you guys don't believe in God, and that's totally okay, but I just want to share my heart, come back. I'll be speaking at 7, and he did a special message about like how he wrote a new book called High Road Leader, and it's basically the biblical principles of Jesus, but in leadership, and he shared his faith. And at the end of it, he says, so if any of you guys want to give your life to God, to Christ, come down. And you're at this conference, there's 3,500 people there, and just hundreds of people, are there. And it's just powerful that, how God works and how he uses people and how you answered that call.
A good testimony can move people. I was at his lunch. It's called the forget the name of it. It's like a men's Christian lunch. I thought all the guys there were believers, and this guy, they call him, I don't know if you've seen this guy called the Bear Man.
No.
This guy, he had a grizzly bear bite his head, and he it was the most horrible story where he heard his skull cracking and everything. You're looking at this guy and you're like, really? And he told this testimony about how, he kept falling in and out of consciousness from this grizzly bear attack, and I'm not gonna do justice to the story, but as he was about to drop out of consciousness again, he got the fear that he was going to go to hell, because he didn't think he was going to live, and God spoke to him, you prayed to receive Christ when you were 12 years old, and I've sealed you with the Holy Spirit. And now this guy goes around and gives this message. Half the guys in the room, after hearing that story, they walked across and gave their life to the Lord. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, I thought y'all were believers. But that's a guy you had to get on your podcast.
We're going to look
the
him
Bear
up.
Man. Google the Bear Man.
Wow.
That was the most amazing testimony.
I think about that joke that says the atheist is getting attacked by the bear. And he's like, God, please, show up. And he's like, really, after you've denied me, now you want to come to me, right? So all of a sudden the bear stops and he prays and he bows his head and the bear says, thank you for this meal I'm about to enjoy. It was a story of
I've seen
that.
Yeah, I think it was the toolbox lunch. I thought of it. That's what it is. It's a great lunch.
Last couple questions, because I could just ask you a bunch of questions. I'm 38. I got two kids, third on the way. You're 58. You've done amazing things and lived this life. What advice do you give to a young entrepreneur? Or I wouldn't say I'm a young entrepreneur, but I have a lot of young entrepreneurs. I'm a young guy figuring out life, marriage, family. I know it's a general question, but any advice that the 58-year-old would give to a 38-year-old?
Yeah, figure out what's important in your life. I told you what's important in my life. It may not be the same for some young single guy, but figure out what's important in your life and prioritize your life around it, right? It's nobody's ever on their deathbed saying they wish they worked harder, ever, ever. I wish I would have spent more time in the office. Wish I would have made more money. It's never that. It's I wish I would have had a family. I wish I would have done this or that. Figure out what that is now and do that. That's my advice.
It's great advice. Yeah, it's challenging because you always put certain things off till like, well, when I have more money or when I'm there, when I get to that position, then and there's never enough. It's always more. There's always going to be more.
Money's nice, but I've been broke and I've been a millionaire, and I was happy broke. My wife said yes, she would marry me, right? I mean, like I literally had spent every cent I had on her ring. I mean, that was a happy day. That $1 million is just sitting in an account, like,
yeah,
I mean.
Yeah.
It's not really bringing me a happiness. It's growing.
Yeah. I think when you come from stress and struggle, I grew up in, have amazing parents, always provided, always food, always somewhere to live, did their absolute best, but stress, business, jobs, went away, companies closed down. So there was a lot of stress in the relationship at just times like normal, you're raising kids and you're trying to provide and there's fear there of what if something goes wrong. And so seeing that stress really drove me to like, I got to go get financially sound. And so sometimes, you put off a lot of these things that are, inner happiness, inner peace to take care of the exterior issues. And then you get older and you realize there's still things I got to take care of. And I started doing consulting. A gentleman, Kevin Lawrence, wrote a book called Your Oxygen Mask First. And a friend gave it to me and I was like, I cannot read this book, dude. I got like 50 books I haven't read. I can't even take the book. And she's like, you really need to read this book. So I'm on a plane, I'm reading the book and I'm just like, damn, I need to read this book. And just talks about like, do you have a life that you're happy living, and how you have to create this environment where you're filled up, where you're full so you could feed other people. And so I end up reaching out to him, get involved with one of his partners, Tim, and we start doing coaching together. And he says, so what's important to you? What are your priorities? And I was like, my wife, God, health, my family, finances. And he's like, so if I looked at your schedule, would I see that?
That's it, right?
And I was like, well, I'm doing it for them, but that was this starting to change 2.5-3 years ago, where I started to really say, okay, I got to put God here and I got to do a better job of it. Date
you get night. You get there. I can already tell your mind's churning. You're thinking about these things.
Yeah.
You do it.
Well, thank you for being on. Look forward to keeping a friendship with you.
Yep.
And congratulations on all your success. Amazing story. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So, guys, if I can, right, how to live an abundant life, I'm looking forward to reading this. I haven't gotten a chance to yet, but if you haven't gotten it, Shane, as I told you, Shane, read it to make sure we were prepared for the meeting and whatnot. And he was just telling me so many stories. So I'm looking forward to reading it. And thank you for being on.
You bet. Thanks.
So, guys, we'll see you on the next episode. And again, a couple takeaways for those of you guys that just want to live an abundant life, right? The book. For those of you guys, health things, right? Some of you guys may know some people who are dealing with health things, health challenges. Sometimes you'll get a message and you don't know where, that message is going to come from, but you're praying, you're looking for something. This could be an opportunity there. So reach out, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.